Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video, I'm going to be discussing my view of the results from the Westminster by-election yesterday, where the Conservatives held onto their seat, but not without providing some points of interest, but also looking ahead to the rather more dangerous by-election for Boris Johnson in 2 weeks' time. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So my main focus, whenever I'm looking at these by-elections, is what will Conservative MPs think about them in relation to their support for Boris Johnson? Because being clear, it doesn't actually make any real difference this Parliament whether the Conservatives lose every by-election. Their majority is absolutely massive. It's the biggest they've had for decades. But if the Conservatives lose very safe seats, and they've already lost one this year to the Liberal Democrats, then Conservative MPs in equally or less safe seats will imagine that they could lose theirs at the next election as well. If Old Bexley and Sidcup had been lost to Labour yesterday, with the results coming out today, Tory MPs would now be in open panic because that's as safe a seat as you can get. But it wasn't lost. The Conservatives did hold it, and they hold it fairly comfortably. But let's take a look at the results and what can and can't be read into them, in my view. So first of all, turnout wasn't great. About a third of the electorate turned up. So from that point of view, trying to look ahead to a general election, it's not very good. It's not a good indicator. Because if more people had turned up, how would they have voted? We don't know. But the thing is, it is a by-election. They're not attended by as many people as in a general election. And yes, it's absolutely ridiculous that someone can be made just one of a few hundred lawmakers in Westminster with only 1 out of every 3 eligible citizens voting. But that's how it is. Cue the Australians telling us that we're nuts for not making voting compulsory. But I don't think that even a government that wanted to do this, and the Conservatives absolutely do not want to do it, they're about voter suppression. But even a government that wanted to bring in compulsory voting wouldn't be able to. Like, if you try to force someone from Britain to accept £1 million, they'd complain about being told what to do. That's what we're like. You can also see that the Conservatives lost a significant amount of vote share. Labour gained, the Lib Dems lost. The last one is easy to explain. The Lib Dems did put up a candidate, but essentially gave Labour a clear run. In fact, I was reading that the Lib Dem candidate only campaigned in a couple of wards where it's so true blue that Labour would never have picked up the votes from that area. So actually, even then, they were technically trying to help Labour out. They were essentially persuading Tory voters not to vote Tory. Potentially useful to Labour there. Is it as useful as not standing at all? I don't know. I mean, whether that calculation will be different in different constituencies. Reform UK also stood a candidate. This is what the Brexit Party became. And their chairman, Richard Tice, was the candidate. So Reform UK threw everything at this election, just as the Conservatives understandably did. What I don't understand is why Labour didn't. Yes, it was not a realistic target. They were not likely to win it, come what may. And certainly now that we see the results, we say, yeah, I mean, Keir Starmer wasn't going to flip that. But I don't know why he didn't go along for a bit of door knocking, bit of practice at least. Why not at least put some effort in? But anyway, back to that dip in the Conservative vote share and the rise in the Labour vote share. Is it significant? Like, it looks like it is. Nowhere near enough for Labour to have flipped this seat. But you could extrapolate and say, but Tory MPs in less safe seats, oh, they'd be worried, because you imagine a similar proportional swing. That could spell danger for ones in seats that aren't as safe as that. You know, and Tory MPs in actual marginals, they'd be crapping themselves. But let's not go mad here. You know, there's good and there's bad about this. So this graphic is actually from the Guardian's report. They had another graphic as well, which is enlightening. If you look at Labour's much improved vote share, it's actually about the same as it was in 2017. So if you could think, you could think that this isn't that great after all. In fact, I know that some Conservatives are actually saying, oh, don't go mad. It's only what Labour got in 2017. But bear this in mind, in 2017, there was a lot of tactical voting going on. A lot of people that weren't traditional Labour supporters voted Labour in order to stop Brexit. It wasn't enough to propel Labour into government, but it was enough to cost the Conservatives their majority. In fact, it wouldn't have taken that many more votes for Labour in a few key seats to have actually been able to form a government. Bear in mind, 2017, Theresa May lost her majority. 2019, Boris Johnson got the biggest Tory majority in several decades. Boris Johnson only got about an extra 300,000 votes more than Theresa May. For that huge majority. That's first past the post there. In 2017, the result for Labour was closer than it looked. Because of our first past the post, it messes everything up. You know, if where we are now, possibly halfway through the election cycle, is that Labour are already in the position that they were in 2017, and they can build on that before the election proper, then that relatively small extra leap that Labour needed 4 years ago could be possible. That being said, this is one by-election, and the party in government often suffers a bit from dissatisfied voters in by-elections. So let's not, project one result across the entire country and map it onto a general election where turnout will be high and all the rest of it. That being said, if I were a Conservative MP in a seat where I had no more than about 50% of the vote in 2019, I'd be worried by this result. We know from polling and canvassing that people, including Conservative voters, are genuinely unimpressed with Boris Johnson. It's not just the usual dissatisfaction with the government that seems to overpromise in the election campaign and underdeliver. It's the real disdain for very specific flaws in his government that have got nothing to do with politics. The corruption, the sleaze, the one rule for them, another for the rest of us. None of these are politics. None of these are about the delivery of policies. They're about character flaws. People being fundamentally unfit to govern. Moderate Conservatives hate all that as much as the rest of us. And another thing to bear in mind, it's very hard to persuade a Conservative voter to switch to Labour. They're polar opposites. That's why a seat like this was never realistically on the cards. It was just interesting, could they push it closer? But the Liberal Democrats provide a palatable alternative for many Conservatives with a small c. The by-election in 2 weeks' time in North Shropshire is not a duel between the Tories and Labour, but between the Tories and the Lib Dems. Now, if you look at the 2019 general election, Labour were actually second, a distant second, but they were second. In fact, there wasn't much difference in the way the results panned out between Old Bexley and Sidcup, where Labour challenged yesterday, and North Shropshire, where the Lib Dems want to. It's like, so why are the Lib Dems throwing the kitchen sink at this one? And why are Labour stepping aside? Because it's a very Conservative area. There's no way of Labour flipping this one. And the Liberal Democrats have been making gains in the local councils. So, in the by-elections there. And another thing as well, never mind the 2019 general election. If you look at the past few elections, you look at sort of general trend, you can see that the Conservatives used to be on about 50% of the vote share. That's where they were quite consistently, about 50%. Always winning, of course, because, first past the post. But round about 50%. Generally, it was actually just over 50%, so that's fine. Until 2017, when it surged. What happened? Why did it surge? Brexit, I suspect. But now we've left the EU. No reason to vote for the Conservatives for a Brexit policy that outside of the EU they are making a proper arse of. Couple that with the real dissatisfaction for the way Boris Johnson is conducting himself, the way the Conservatives are breaking their spending promises, the fact that they will get a new candidate who won't be well known, may not be as trusted as their former, now disgraced MP who shouldn't have been trusted in the first place. And this one could be even closer. In fact, you'd expect it to be even closer. It seems improbable because the Conservatives got just as large a vote share as Old Bexley and Sidcup, and on the face of it, the Liberal Democrats need a way bigger swing. They were nowhere in 2010. And it's true that the Conservatives are still very, very likely to win this one. I'm not suggesting we're on for an upset. I'm not going to say, yesterday Labour didn't really have much chance, but the next one could be interesting. It could be interesting, but not in terms of a Lib Dem win. Can't rule it out, but very unlikely. But the bookies have been shortening the odds on the Liberal Democrats winning. The odds have been coming down. They were about 3-1. In fact, I remember thinking I might have a little punt at 3-1. I didn't in the end. I thought that might be interesting, 3-1. At the time of recording this, it's even shorter than 2-1 now. fact, Ladbrokes has 13-8 on a Lib Dem win. They really don't want too many people betting on the outcome. They're thinking to themselves, basically the bookies at the moment are going, look, the Conservatives are going to win. But we're not that certain. And bookmakers make sure they understand the odds. Labour failed to run the Conservatives close yesterday. But it wasn't really on. There's no way that a seat like Old Bexley and Sidcup should ever be a Labour target at the next... In fact, at the next election, there's no way that's a Labour target. You know, I think in 2019, they were able to target about 80 seats, Labour. Even if you targeted 150 seats, Old Bexley and Sidcup would not be one of them. No way in hell. But the Liberal Democrats could genuinely run the Conservatives close in 2 weeks' time in North Shropshire. The bookies are not ruling it out. And it's a lot easier for a dissatisfied Conservative voter to vote Lib Dem than Labour. And in the context of the general election, the non-aggression pact that has existed between Labour and the Lib Dems looks likely to be used on the big one as well. Yes, they're not standing candidates down for each other. Realistically, that's not going to happen. It's quite clear now. But they are making sure that they don't blow resources on the same seat as each other. Even the Financial Times is reporting this now. If the Lib Dems do get the Tory share of the vote in North Shropshire down to, let's say, below 50%, and especially if they themselves get within 10%, that'll be interesting. In that case, although both by-elections will have still been won by the Conservatives, the results will worry a lot of Tory MPs. If the Lib Dems run a very, very safe Tory seat like North Shropshire close, then any Tory MP in only a moderately safe seat, but with a Lib Dem challenger, will genuinely feel fear for their chances at the next election. Old Bexley and Sidcup, as comfortable as it looked, will still have worried some Tory MPs in more vulnerable seats. So take the so-called Red Wall Tories, for example. Imagine you are a Conservative MP, you've taken this seat that's been Labour for decades. If Labour could get a swing in a true blue Tory area like they've just done, what's your seat going to be like? If Labour get as much of a swing as big as the one they got yesterday, in the northern seats that Johnson took in 2019, they'll be out of a job again. Almost all of them will be out of a job in 2 years' time. You know, they've only just got their seat on the gravy train, and this result is telling them that they'll be getting off at the next stop. So although this result on Thursday is very far from panic-inducing disaster for Boris Johnson and the Conservatives, they'll absolutely not be panicking, it should still be something to concern many of them. And North Shropshire, as I say, has the power to actually scare some, even if they win. If it's run close, and it's more likely to be run close than yesterday. But those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, don't forget to click the like button. And if you'd like to support the channel further, please also click the Patreon link for details. And until next time, I'll see you later.